Bella's gift. It was 6 o'clock in the evening, and Jillian Froder was late. Drifting out of a daydream, Jillian looked around her small stone room. She spotted the tiny Tom-Tom, whose ringing ears had alerted her to the time. "Thank you, friend," she said. The Tom-Tom nodded back, careful not to disrupt the motion of his tail, which swung in the steady rhythm, ticking off seconds. Jillian knew she should get moving, but her mind remained fixed on her daydream, which had come to her like a vision. She'd seen a mare with a dazzling white coat that shone like diamonds in the sunlight. Her dark eyes, speckled with flecks of gold, were wise and loving. Everything about the horse seemed magical, and Jillian longed to make a drawing of the mare in her memory journal. Jillian gazed at the pages of the small midnight blue book lying open on her desk in front of her. This was her most treasured possession. Its worn parchment pages were filled with drawings. Each was a memory of a person or a creature Jillian had envisioned in her 12 years. The visions came to Jillian in flashes, when she was alone and quiet and her mind was free to wonder. She was always searching for her memory for answers to questions about her past. She tried hard to conjure images of her family, creatures she'd seen, and strangers she'd met. By capturing their likenesses in her journal, she felt as though something in her mind were being brought to life. The paper and the ink started to make it real. Jillian sighed and tucked a stray red curl behind her ear. There was no time now to draw the great horse she'd just seen. Before closing the book, she ran her index finger lovingly over the last drawing she had made, the otter. Jillian had seen the otter more than a year ago when she was out in the woods around Steigenmoor Castle, collecting berries for her mistress, Ivana. Down by a small brook, she had felt a strange sensation and turned to see the otter with striking pink fur staring at her, almost as if it was studying her. Otters still have pink fur. That creature's gaze was so intense that Jillian had felt suddenly shy and looked away. When she turned back, the otter had disappeared. The memory of the otter had returned to Jillian, frozen in her mind like an icicle a week ago. She'd eagerly made the drawing and captured every detail of the animal forever in her journal. She wondered now if she would see the otter again, as she had so many other creatures she had drawn. The blank page opposite the illustrated otter beckoned Jillian, but the Tom-Tom's tail ticked on. A gentle reminder. She had to hurry. It was time to prepare Ivana's dinner. It will have to stay blank for now, she thought as she gently closed the book. Jillian removed the loose stone from the wall, revealing an empty nook. She tucked the journal, her quill pen, and a small pot of ink into the space and replaced a stone. As Jillian hurried into the chilly stone corridor, a warm light blossomed in the darkness. A small cave of woven grapevines filled with twinkle imps lit her way. She loved their soft glow, but her heart ached to see them locked up. She wished her tiny friends could be free in the forest where they belong. Wow, there's imps, too. "I'll sneak you something special from the kitchen," she whispered, careful not to let the wolf guard who was stationed in the corridor overhear. "There's a wolf guard, John." The imps blinked back their thanks. Jillian had lived with the dank walls of Steigenmoor Castle for as long as she could remember. According to Ivana, the baby Jillian had been abandoned at the gates of Steigenmoor by her family, a band of traveling gypsies. She'd had nothing with her but a small satchel containing her midnight blue leather notebook, a small quill pen, and a pot of ink. Ivana missed no opportunity to remind Jillian how grateful she should be to have a roof over her head. I've heard this story before. It's called Cinderella. But life in the castle was difficult. Built on the edge of a marsh near an ancient forest, Steigenmoor was not a place of beauty or love. With Ivana's wolf guards patrolling the castle and its grounds at all times, Jillian was resignated to the fact that she was a prisoner at Steigenmoor Castle. Ivana presided over the castle with guile and cruelty. She used her army of wolves to frighten the castle's inhabitants into obedience. As her maids, Jillian attended to Ivana's every whim and need. In all the years Jillian had been at the castle, her mistress had never once spoken a kind word to her. Ivana trusted no one but her wolf confidant, Myfor. Ivana and Myfor had always spent hours conspiring and scheming together. Recently, though, their discussions had become even more intense. Jillian had overheard enough to know they were up to something. She didn't know what it was, but she knew it couldn't be good. Since she received no love from her mistress, the magical creatures who toiled in the castle alongside Jillian had become her family. Like her, some strange fate had led them to Steigenmoor, and now they were all trapped there. Julian dreamed of her life for herself and her magical friends, free of the castle's dark, dreary walls and mindless chores. But even if I could escape, she thought, I have nothing and no one. Where would I go? Julian rushed through the main kitchen and poked her head anxiously into the dining room. She let out a sigh of relief. Ivana was not there yet. Just some pipsqueak longtails furiously dusting every speck from the large wooden dining tables with their big bushy tails. When the small creatures looked her way, Julian smiled. I think you missed a spot, she teased, as she placed a pair of candlesticks on the table. Back in the kitchen, magical creatures were scurrying around in preparation for the evening meal. Everything had to be in perfect order before Ivana and Myfor arrived. Bobolinks unloaded heaping baskets of winter berries, mushrooms, and herbs, foraged from the forest. First spoops were hard at work, heating pots of water, and 2 rose dragons chopped mounds of herbs and vegetables. The mood in the room seemed to lighten when Julian entered. What you doing, buddy? You trying to fix it? Oh, you're good. Good evening, friend, she said, taking particularly heavy baskets. Don't put that in your eye. It'll hurt your eyeballs. She said, taking particularly heavy baskets from a small bobolink and setting it on the counter. She tucked a handful of berries into the pockets of her apron to give the twinkle imps later. No! A large pot of porridge bubbled for dinner. Julian wondered as she bent to stoke the fire. Ivana usually ate fancier food, but as the flames leaped higher, something happened to make her forget about Ivana's strange request. A form emerged from a bright white flame. It was a horse's head, its manes flaring out behind it. Julian was sure her mind was playing tricks on her. First a vision of the magnificent white horse, now this. What could it mean? But when she stirred the logs again, her horse disappeared. Just as Julian was straightening the last piece of silverware on the dining table, she felt a chill trickling down her spine. She didn't have to turn around to know Ivana and Myfor had entered the room. I see you've left everything to the last minute as usual, Ivana's sharp voice echoed off the bare stone walls. Julian turned to see Myfor sniffing at the air. As usual, his hulking frame, covered in jack-black fur, was tense and rigid. His dark eyes followed her. Not wanting him to sense her fear, Julian bravely returned his gaze. Ivana pointed her metal staff at Julian and gave her a suspicious look. I trust you've prepared the meal I requested, she said. Yes, of course, Julian replied. The porridge will be ready shortly. Porridge, growled Myfor. He spoke in the language the wolves used to communicate with their riders. It sounded like a throaty snarling and snapping. Few humans who were not wolf riders could understand it, but Julian had grown up around Myfor and his pack. Don't worry, Myfor, Ivana said. We won't be eating mush. I ordered the fire spoops to simmer up a joint of meat for us. We will dine as soon as this ridiculous child has served our special guest. Give me the key. Myfor bent his neck. Leaning forward, Ivana lifted off a chain from her which hung a massive iron key. She held it out to Julian. Take it, she said impatiently when Julian hesitated. Julian swallowed nervously. What sort of special guest? She stammered. Most visitors came to the castle were wolf riders, as mysterious and unkind as Ivana herself. That, Ivana replied, is for Myfor and me to know, and for you to find out. But don't worry, I think you'll be rather fond of this guest. It's someone who's rather drawn to you already. Ivana looked at Myfor and let out a laugh. Myfor grinned back at her, his fangs gleaming against his red tongue. As Julian turned her back into the kitchen, she felt her stomach clench into a familiar knot of anxiety. Ivana was a master of cruel games, and surprises around Steigenmore Castle were rarely good. In all her years at the castle, Julian had never been in the corridor in which she found herself. Ivana had directed her to a secret door in their chambers. It led to a winding set of stairs and down to the dank, moldy-smelling passage, whose walls oozed drops of greenish water. There were no windows, so she couldn't be sure, but Julian suspected the whole wing was underground. Julian followed the turns of the hall cautiously, passing several wolf guards along the way. One of them looked at her and licked his chops. His eyes gleamed red. She tried to steady her shaking hands as dish of porridge clattered quietly against the heavy silver trays. It will be all right, she whispered to herself, only half believing. After several minutes, Julian reached the end of the passage. A small set of stairs led up to the thick oak door secured by a heavy iron lock. One thing was certain, Ivana did not want who was ever inside to get out. Julian set the tray carefully on the top stair. Her palms were sweaty as she fumbled in her pocket for the iron key. She recalled how Ivana had pulled the key from Myfor's neck. No doubt it had been with Myfor for safekeeping. Myfor was the toughest wolf at Steigenmore Castle. Not one human or animal dared challenge Myfor, a descendant of Finra, the wolf monster, who, according to legend, had powers so strong he could not even be restrained by the gods. Julian fitted the key into her lock. Taking a deep breath, she forced herself to turn swiftly to the left as Ivana had instructed. With a smooth click, the lock gave way. Julian lifted the silver tray once more and pressed open the large oak door with the weight of her body. She immediately felt a presence. A wave of fear washed over her. Then she saw who it was in the room. She gasped with amazement, nearly dropping the tray. The otter! At once Julian's fear melted away, replaced with a warm rush of relief. Sensing the creature's goodness, Julian stepped forward. "I brought you something to eat," she said, setting the bowl of porridge on the small table. "I'm sorry it's not much." Julian's gaze into the otter's big eyes. The otter wore a star-shaped pendant on a chain of pearls around its neck. "What brought you here to this dark place?" Julian asked. The otter looked quickly away and then back at Julian. This time Julian, Daddy, saw a deep sadness in the creature's eyes. And something else as well, pity. Puzzled, Julian cast her eyes downward to the polished silver tray. Her reflection stared back at her. When she looked up again, Julian noticed that the stone around the otter's neck was glowing softly. An image flashed into Julian's mind, a blue journal. She saw herself drawing the otter. Something clicked in her mind. "Me?" Julian whispered. Did I bring you here?" Julian knew she'd always had special bonds with animals. Now, standing before the otter, her mind turned all her magical friends in the castle. As she thought about them, she realized each of them had arrived at Steigenmore soon after she'd drawn them in her notebook. Slowly, things began to make sense. A feeling of dread washed over her. By drawing them in her journal, Julian was luring the creatures to the castle. It was her fault they had come to Steigenmore and been captured by Ivana. A lump formed in Julian's throat, and a tear splashed down into her silver tray. "You're here because of my drawings, aren't you?" she said to the otter. "I'm so sorry. I promise you I did not know." She let out a sob. "Dear child, do not blame yourself. It is true you possess the ability to draw animals to you. This is a rare and special gift which should be cherished. Instead, it has been abused by your mistress." The otter could speak to her.
No.
No. Want me to turn it off?
No.
No. What are you doing with all your laminate? Are you looking at it all, buddy?
Just spell word laminate.
Laminate. Laminate. Wait. Laminate. Laminate. That sound right?
Yes.
Yeah. When can I turn this off, John Paul?
Turn off right now.
Okay. It is a starstone I wear around my neck, explained the otter. One of its powers is it allows us to share our thoughts. Julian was fascinated, her mind filled with questions about the precious starstone. "I'm afraid there's no time now to tell you more about the stone's magic," said the otter, interrupting Julian's train of thought. "We must plan our escape from the castle. We must also find a way to free the magical creatures that are trapped here. You see, I have been observing the castle for some time now. About 2 years ago, it became evident that a number of magical creatures were disappearing from all over the north of North. I began investigating and eventually traced the missing animals to Steigenmore." "So you were looking for the creatures that day when I saw you outside the castle grounds?" asked Julian. "That's right. It was very foolish of me to let myself be seen like that, although I do not regret that it has led me to you," the otter replied. "I still don't understand," said Julian. "Does Ivana know I have the ability to summon animals? Has she been using me to draw magical creatures to Steigenmore? She already has plenty of servants. Why would she want more? Yes, she knows about your ability. I suspect she's collecting the animals so she can steal their magic and use it to increase her own," answered the otter. "For many years, Ivana has searched for a way to overcome her sworn enemies, the Valkyries. They are the first horse riders. My good friend is the leader of all horses, Bella." At once, Julian pictured the white horse she'd been seeing in her daydream. "Bella," she whispered, saying the name aloud sent a tingle across her skin. Before Julian could ask any more questions, she heard a rustling at the door. The otter's eyes went wide with fear. Someone was listening. Julian whipped around. There in the doorway was the hulking frame of a wolf. For a moment, Julian went ice cold. Then she recognized the wolf. "Connell," she cried, "you scared me half to death." The big wolf huffed softly. the sound almost like a snorting chuckle. "Don't worry," Julian explained to the otter. "This is Connell. He's not like the other wolves." Connell growled. "Well, you're not," Julian insisted. "Even if you are looking more and more like my four every day, no one could call you the run of the litter anymore, could they, Fuzzyfoot?" Julian and Connell had grown up together in the castle. Smaller than his littermates, Connell's sweet nature had endeared him to Julian from the first. Even though Ivana and Myfor had tried to keep them apart, the girl and the wolf shared a brother and sister-like bond. Some days they were the best of friends. Other days they got under each other's skin in ways no one else could know. The other thing that set Connell apart from the rest of the wolves was his silence. Although he barked and growled like any wolf, he had never once spoken the wolf language. Myfor and Ivana thought he was mute. Julian wondered if it had more to do with his goodness. The wolf's tongue just sounded evil. No one could use it to say kindly things. As they had gotten older, Connell had grown large and strong. He was one of the biggest wolves now, nearly as massive as his father, Myfor. He was the swiftest runner and the stealthiest stalker in the pack. In spite of the fact that he didn't talk, Ivana and Myfor were starting to notice him. The wolves were beginning to whisper that Connell was most likely the successor to Myfor. Although she still believed in Connell's goodness, Julian had begun to feel a distance growing between herself and her friend. She feared that the day was coming when Connell would be forced to choose between the wolves and his friendship with her. She wished she could be sure of how he would choose. Connell's sudden appearance here in the otter room was no accident. Julian knew she was taking too long with the key. Ivana and Myfor must have sent Connell to track her down, maybe even to spy. They too had their doubts about his loyalty and tested him whenever they could. Julian turned to the otter. "I'm sorry," she said. "I have to leave here for now, but I promise I'll come back as soon as possible." The otter nodded. Connell grunted impatiently. "All right, Fuzzyfoot," Julian said. "Let's go." When they reached the dining room, Ivana and Myfor were waiting. "Good work, Connell," Ivana said. "You are dismissed." Connell slinked away without looking back. Julian approached Ivana, holding out the key. "What took you so long, girl?" Ivana snapped, snatching the key from Julian's grasp. "Learning about our new guest, were you? Anything you want to share?" "No, I simply did as you told me and delivered the porridge," Julian said as calmly as possible. She couldn't let Ivana know her mind was racing with the thoughts of the otter, the great horse Bella, and everything she had learned about her own powers. Myfor sniffed and sucked at the scrap of meat in his teeth. "The girl is a liar," he snarled. "I can smell the lies." Yes, Ivana said. "I don't believe she's telling the whole truth either, but I do trust she'd let us know if she learned anything upsetting. She simply couldn't hide it. She is such a delicate soul when it comes to magical creatures." Ivana looked at Julian. It was a test to see if her words had hit their mark, to find out if she knew. But Julian kept cool, giving away nothing. "Is that all, mistress?" she asked. Ivana's eyes narrowed. "This conversation is finished for tonight," she said. "Now go and see to my bath." Julian walked swiftly from the dining room, but paused outside the door to listen. She heard Ivana cross the room to Myfor. "Guard this closely," Ivana said. "The girl was obviously hiding something. I don't know what it was, but she must never again be alone in that room with the otter." Julian stumbled to Ivana's bathing chamber. She felt as though she had been walking through swamp fog. Her head was swimming with all she had learned. In the bathing room, bubbled turtles were already toiling away, creating mountains of lather. Tassel mice stood up for attention, ready for their hairbrushing and braiding duties. "It's my fault they're trapped here, forced to work long days and nights," Julian thought sadly. Ivana had used her to draw the creatures to Sycamore Castle, and a life of servitude. Who knew what else she had in store for them? A cloud of guilt settled in Julian's chest, until she felt she could barely breathe. "I can't let this go. I have to do something," she said to herself. Rushing back to her small room, Julian ran over to the loose stone in the wall. She would get her journal and make the drawing of the great white horse, Bella. If Julian could summon other creatures by drawing them in her memory journal, she was sure she could summon Bella too. The leader of the horses would help the otter and the other magical creatures in the castle. Wouldn't she? But what if Bella got caught in Ivana's grasp too, Julian wondered. Then we'd all be in danger. Then Julian remembered her dream of Bella and the magic that emanated from her white coat and gold-flecked eyes. A horse that's that spectacular would find a way to evade Ivana's cruel tricks. Julian's heart raced as she slid the stone aside and reached into the nook. Her hand felt around in the dark space for the journal. She reached and reached. There was nothing there. The journal was gone. Julian woke the next day at sunrise. It was a new day, and she had to make a new plan. She wouldn't rest until the otter and the other magical creatures were free, and that meant she had to find a way to summon Bella. As Julian gazed out her tiny window, the fog-shrouded landscape seemed almost beautiful. She felt a sense of power and purpose, as if the light had gone out from inside her and nothing could put it out. After attending to the breakfast duties, Julian went down to the laundry in the basement of the castle. The room was warm with air thick with steam. Laundry bubbles bubbled away in massive cauldrons heated by spoops. Wiffle bears flew this way and that, sprinkling lavender and rose petals into the wash water. It crushed Julian to think these gentle creatures were working long hours every day to serve a mistress as cold and as ungrateful as Ivana. How can I help? Julian asked her friends. She was always happy to pitch in, but her mind was also swirled with the plan she was making. And the first part of her plan was finding an excuse to slip outside to find Connell. Julian spied a large basket of wet laundry sitting on one of the work tables. I'll hang these linens out in the fresh air, she said. Julian lugged the heavy basket up many flights of stone stairs and outside of the castle grounds. As she stepped outdoors, she blinked. It took a moment for her eyes to adjust. When they did, she caught her breath. Sunlight, actual sunlight. The sun hardly ever appeared around Steigenmore Castle, and Julian was unaccustomed to it. But today the usual fog was swirling, shredding as shafts of light from the sky pierced the gloom. There were even small patches of blue here and there. Although winter wasn't quite over yet, the air had a tinge of warmth in it, as if the weather itself had decided to cooperate for her plan. Glancing around, Julian found 2 trees she could use to string up the clothesline. She placed the basket on the ground and set to work. As Julian finished tying the line, she heard ferocious snarling behind her. A pack of young wolves snapped and growled at each other as their games of hunt and catch spilled across the lawn to where Julian was working. She knew the wolves were just playing, but the violence of their game made her shudder. A particularly large wolf came bounding after the others, Connell. Julian had to get his attention. She needed her friend to help her with her plan. The pack began to move past Julian as Connell closed in on them. Psst, Fuzzyfoot, Julian whispered from behind a wet sheet. Over here. Connell's ears twitched and his head whipped around. He froze mid-stride, breaking off his chase. After looking around cautiously, he approached Julian. She felt his hesitation. Sorry to interrupt your game, Julian said, but I need your help. I've only got to see the other again. It's the only way to help the magical creatures. That means I have to get the key from Myfor. I was thinking since you're away, it would be easier for you. Connell gave Julian a look that stopped her mid-sentence. I know it's not easy for you, Fuzzyfoot, Julian said. Her heart ached for him, torn as if he was between her tribe and her own kind heart. I know you're one of them, but you're different too. The breeze shifted. Julian looked up and saw Myfor across the grounds. On a day like this, he was likely coming to round up the young wolves for a hunt in the woods. Connell had also noticed him. Giving Julian one last glance, he turned and ran to catch up with the pack. Julian's heart sank. She knew Connell had to do what the other wolves expected of him. Going against him would be too difficult. Still, she was hurt. Julian used to think that she would be on her side forever. Now she wasn't so sure. She took a deep breath. She was going to find a way to get the key from Myfor herself. Myfor was too strong for Julian to confront directly. She would never win in a battle against him. The only way she was going to get the key is if she could find a way to sneak up on him. Maybe I can steal the key while he sleeps tonight, thought Julian. She shook her head impatiently. No, that's impossible. Everyone knows he sleeps lightly and wakes at even the smallest noise. Unless, suddenly, Julian knew exactly what to do. Tell me when I'm done filming, John Paul. You get to play outside today? Good. Mom. Am I done filming?
No.
Okay.
filming off.
Maybe I can steal the key while he sleeps tonight, thought Julian. She shook her head impatiently. No, that's impossible. Everyone knows he sleeps lately. Unless, suddenly Julian knew exactly what to do. Got it? With many of the wolves away on their hunt and Ivana within the castle walls, Julian had the perfect chance to carry out her new plan. First, she had to sneak into the castle herbarium. Unless she was given orders to fetch something for Ivana, Julian was strictly forbidden from going to the herbarium. She would have to be very careful. Julian kept the laundry basket and one wet sheet with her in case she ran into anyone. If she were caught, she could pretend she was just putting the sheet out to the line. Across the back field, a few rose dragons tended an outdoor garden. Everything was quiet and still as Julian approached the herbarium. She always felt this was a magical place with its shiny rose-colored glass jars, its exotic hothouse plants, and its deep, spicy scent. Peering through a large glass window, Julian saw no one inside the herbarium. So far, so good. On such a day, she knew the master herbalist was likely to go out gathering herbs with the tea leaf pandas and ivy-tailed dragons. These creatures knew how to find plants and roots better than any other. In their right hands, potions from the roots and herbs could be used to do wonderful things, heal wounds, mend broken wings, cure sickness. But in the dark world of wolf riders like Ivana, potions were used for far more selfish purposes, learning secrets, making threats, and using dark magic. As Julian thought of Ivana, her resolve was renewed. She carefully cracked open the herbarium door. The smell of the plants and potions drifted over her. Now, Julian whispered to herself, I just have to find the right herbs. She stared up at a wall of glass jars. There were hundreds of them, carefully arranged by color and name, containing every type of herb and root imaginable. Arrowroot, baneberry, bear's foot, belladonna, Bella. Jillian thought of the great white horse. Her pulse quickened as she moved to the next row of jars with quick determination.
Going to bed when the clock says.
Now, Paul, are we reading?
Going to bed when the clock says.
Whenever we're done. Can you shut the... Are we going to read?
You're going to bed when the clock says.
Whenever we're done reading.
After done reading, then you're going to bed when the clock says.
Yeah. Can you close the door?
No.
You want the door open?
Yes.
Okay. Bella, Jillian thought of the great white horse. Her pulse quickened as she moved to the next row of jars with new determination. But after several minutes and many more rows, she grew frustrated. There were too many jars, and she didn't know the first thing about plants. She had been hoping to find the master herbalist's book of recipes, but he must have either hidden it or taken it with him. Salvia, Sansevieria. It's no use, she cried. I'll never find a right herb for sleeping potion. Julian's eyes welled up with tears. What was she going to do? Crash. Something hit the floor behind her and shattered. Julian ducked for cover behind a large wooden collection chest. Her heart beat wildly. Had she been caught? Seconds ticked by. No one hauled her out from her hiding place. Finally, Julian summoned the courage to peek out. When she did, she saw a gorgeous violet pixie hovering in the air, its shiny purple wings glinting in the light. A blue glass jar lay smashed on the flagstones. Dried leaves were scattered everywhere. Is this what I'm looking for? Julian stammered. The violet pixie swooped down and circled the broken glass jar and then flew off through the open window.
You're going to bed when the clock says.
Whenever I'm done reading in 10 minutes. Don't worry about Alicia. Okay?
Daddy, you're going to bed when the clock says.
In 10 minutes.
Yes.
Whenever I'm done reading, I'm going to help her get tucked in.
Yes, when the clock says 7:45.
Yeah. Yeah.
What time is it?
6:35?
Yes, 7:45.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I meant. 7:35.
Correct.
Thank you, Julian whispered. Maybe she wasn't alone after all. Julian plucked the herbs from the floor and then carefully swept up the broken glass. She couldn't risk the master herbalist finding it and becoming suspicious. Julian tucked both glass and herbs into the laundry basket and draped the wet sheet over the top. Her plan was underway. Chapter 5. Thank you, friend, Julian said, taking a fresh bunch of sorrel from Bobolink. Julian chopped the herbs and sprinkled them over Ivana and my four's dinners. They were having Ivana's favorite dish, turtle soup. Little did Ivana know that Julian's recipe lacked one crucial ingredient, turtle. Julian had secretly changed the recipe long ago so that no creatures would be harmed. Instead of turtle, the soup was filled with big chunks of meaty mushrooms, and tonight the soup would contain something extra special, the herbs from the herbarium. The Pipsqueak Longtails, who were in charge of the dining room, were scurrying through the kitchen, ready to set the table and prepare for service. Ivana and my four would be there in minutes. Julian's heart pounded, and an anxious knot formed in her chest. What if the herbs didn't work? If the plan went wrong, she and the others would be in great danger. Julian didn't even want to think about what Ivana might do to them if she even suspected what Julian was up to. She told herself to stop fretting. It would do no good. But there is no other way, she reminded herself. From the hallway, she heard the click of Ivana's staff tapping on the stone floor. This is it, she thought. For better or for worse, there was no going back now. Julian said, I just knew I had to get back here. Approaching... Well, if there's one thing that stupid girl doesn't know how to do, it's make turtle soup, Ivana remarked, reaching for her spoon. Across the table, my four salivated at the smells wafting from his bowl. I hope you like it, Julian said. I made extra so that you could each have 2 servings. She forced a smile and curtsied before leaving the room. After Ivana and my four had finished their second helping of soup, Julian returned to clear the dishes. Entering the room, she was greeted with the sounds of snoring. Ivana's snore was a shrill whistle, and my four's was a deep rumble. The herbs worked. Julian had to act fast. She didn't know how long Ivana and my four would be asleep. If they woke while she was gone, they would realize something was wrong and sound the alarm. Her hands were shaking. Julian quietly approached my four. His massive frame shook with each grumbling snore. Julian hesitated. Even asleep, the big black wolf was terrifying. Don't be a baby, she whispered to herself. You brought the magical creatures here. It's up to you to free them. Julian grasped the chain around my four's neck and lifted it up carefully. It caught momentarily in his thick black fur, but she pulled it free, sliding it over his big pointed ears. She raced through the castle to the secret wing where the otter was being held prisoner. Reaching the wooden door, she quickly turned the key in the lock and pushed it open. I'm back, Julian cried, gasping for breath.
All stuff, all of them unboxing tomorrow.
Is that what we're going to do tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay. The otter turned calmly as if expecting
After
her.
Mommy wake up.
Oh, well, after coffee, maybe?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know how long I have or even what I'm supposed to do. Julian said, I just knew I had to get back. Here. Approaching Julian, the otter bent his elegant neck and gestured to the stone around her neck. The star stone. The star stone, Julian echoed. The stone glowed brightly, and she reached out to touch it. Take it. You or your messenger will need it. Gently, Julian lifted the necklace from the otter's delicate neck and placed it on her own. Immediately, her senses tingled and her mind sharpened. Staring into the otter's eyes, she felt a connection between them. The stone really did allow the wearer to see what others nearby were thinking. The otter nodded intently. Get to Bella at Trail's End and ask her for help. She will know what to do. Be brave, little one. Many depend on you, and you are stronger than you think. No sooner had the otter's message filled Julian's mind than a sharp pain seared her. Wolves. The pack was stirring. Had someone raised the alarm? With the starstone in her possession, Julian could feel the wolf's energy like a dark and dangerous storm cloud coming toward her. Before Julian could act, Connell burst into the room. Connell, Julian cried. How did you know where to find me? Connell ignored her question. His eyes were hard and bright as he scanned the room anxiously. His whole body seemed tense and alert. What is it? She demanded. What's wrong? His thoughts came pouring directly into her mind. It was the first time he had ever communicated directly with her. There was no time to marvel. Some wolf guards found my four asleep and were unable to rouse him. They don't know what is happening. They are in a frenzy. You have to put yourself and others... You have put yourself and others in great danger. It was the only way, Julian cried. I have to free the otter and the magical creatures. You know Ivana is holding them here against her will. Even worse than that, I think she's trying to steal their magic for her own evil purposes. She must be stopped. Please, Connell, you know what I'm saying is true. Do what's right. The howls of the wolf pack grew near. Julian looked deep into her friend's eyes. We have no time. We have to get to the horse Bella at Trail's End. She's the leader of the great herd. She will know what to do. You must do it, Connell. You're a wolf. You can slip away without being noticed. I'll never make it out of here. Connell's response came at once, his fear and anger raging. You ask too much. Trail's End is the heart of the enemy's empire. No wolf could possibly enter such a place. Connell, your heart is good, Julian cried. You're not like the others. If you won't listen to me, listen to your heart. Suddenly, a screech echoed through the hallway. Get the girl! It was Ivana. The herbs have worn off. She and my four had woken. Julian gazed at Connell, her eyes begging. Please, Fuzzyfoot, please, there's no way. Connell stared back at Julian. Years ago, she had befriended him, the unwanted run of the litter. Now he was a large wolf, second only to my four. She was still a little wisp of a girl, thin as a wood sprite, but braver and truer than any wolf he knew. Connell bared his teeth. Give me the starstone. Julie slipped the stone around Connell's neck. Thank you, she whispered. Moments later, the wolf pack burst through the door. My four led the way, snarling and growling. The wolves began to circle Julian. Into chaos, Connell slipped away. Hidden in a dark nook in the hallway, Connell glanced back at his friend. His heart burned with anger as he saw her small frame disappear behind Myfor's hulking shadow. The starstone glowed softly. Wearing it, Connell could clearly see the dark depths of Myfor's evil soul. Fearing Myfor's wrath, Connell had tried all of his life to fit in with the pack. He got no pleasure from mindless hunting, but he had worked hard to become a fearless predator. Over time, his skill and strength had grown until no one but Myfor could best him. He was Myfor's son, and it was increasingly accepted one day that he would lead the pack. But now, seeing into Myfor's black soul, Connell knew that day might never come. He needed to be true to himself. More than anything, Connell wished he could go back and save Julian, but he knew he must do what she had asked of him, no matter what. It was up to him to go to Trail's End and find a great horse, Bella. Not knowing what danger he might face, Connell raced into the night.
Blah.
Blah.
No.
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 Oh, you're saying stung.
Stung. She's upstairs, buddy.
That wasn't very nice means.
That wasn't very nice. That wasn't kind. That was mean or grumpy.
Filming off.
Okay. Chapter 6. Icy winds rushed through the Connell's fur as he ran deep into the forest. Steigenmore Castle grew smaller and smaller until it was just an eerily glowing spot in the landscape. Miles away, Connell's heart pounded. The starstone thudded against his chest. He didn't dare stop. The others might soon discover him missing and be on his trail. His spirit shrank from the thought of what he was doing now. Trail's End was many days' journey from here, and he wasn't even entirely sure which direction to go, but he had to get there now and find this horse, Bella. If he didn't, Julian and the others might be lost forever. There was only one way to get there fast enough: the Shadow Path. The Shadow Path was a magical road that was traveled only by wolves and their riders. It allowed its users to cheat time and traverse the world to a single night. Like all young wolves, Connell had grown up hearing tales of the mysterious path from Myfor and the elders. The Shadow Path was twisted and dangerous. Only the bravest and strongest could withstand its dark magic. Many wolves had entered, never to return. The way to find the Shadow Path, Connell knew, was to allow it to find you. So running headlong into the night, Connell closed his eyes and let darkness envelop him. Suddenly, a powerful force gripped him. He was sucked through a whirlpool of crushing energy. His muscles tensed and the roots of his fur tingled. He didn't fight, and instead allowed himself to be whisked away. A sound began throbbing in Connell's ears. It grew louder until it thundered like an enormous waterfall. Then in an instant, all fell silent. The ground was no longer beneath Connell's feet. He was surrounded by nothingness. A feeling of empty isolation filled him. He had entered the Shadow Path. Connell knew enough about the path to keep his eyes clenched firmly shut. To open them meant exposure to the darkest evil and certain doom. No wolf had ever opened his eyes on the Shadow Path and lived to tell the tale. So Connell ran blindly onward, straining his muscles against the empty against the empty air. As he ventured farther along the path, his fierce hunter's instincts sharpened. Strange sounds and smells swirled all around him. Something was coming, but what and when? The first icy blast made Connell shudder. A moment afterwards, what felt like a dozen of bony fingers began scrabbling at his fur, probing deep under his skin, piercing into his heart. Voices whined around him. Or was it the wind itself? Connell, Connell, we are hungry. Feed us, Connell. Give us your warmth. We are so cold, Connell. The worst thing was, he recognized some of the voices. The urge to open his eyes to see who was speaking was almost harder to bear than the pain. Fighting against both the urge and the pain, he pushed on. The longer he traveled, the more the phantoms tugged at him. Shadows and spirits surrounded him, trying to pull him off the Shadow Path and into the Shadow Realm itself. He understood now that there were lost souls that had once traveled the path but had not made it out. With each step Connell took, he felt more energy drained from his body. His limbs began to feel like lead weights, and he felt an overwhelming urge to stop, lie down, and sleep. He knew, though, that if he stopped, it would be forever. Keep moving, he told himself. Just keep moving, never stop. Connell's mind wandered to the darkest corners. An image of Myfor, fangs bared, cornering a helpless Julian, flashed through his head. In his gut, he felt a hatred of the wolf pack. which could so quickly turn on one of its own. Then saw Ivana smiling cruelly as she raised her staff high to strike Julian down. The images piled on one after another like stones in the castle wall until Connell thought his mind and heart would burst from their weight. Then, just as he felt he could take no more, the probing of the icy fingers stopped. The voices cut off suddenly, as if a door had closed. The dark thoughts lifted. The air grew warmer, denser, and the ground, once again, it was firm beneath his tired feet. Connell felt his lungs expand as fear and pain drained from him. He had made it through the shadow path. Unless the feeling of safety was just one more trick. Only one way to find out. His heart pounding wildly, Connell opened his eyes. Blinking against the breaking light of dawn, Connell slowly glanced around. He stood high on a rocky ledge overlooking a landscape like none he had ever seen. In the distance, trees seemed to burst into lush green leaves. A waterfall cascaded crystal blue water and sparkling like sapphires. Instead of a sinister stone castle, there was dozens of small thatched farm cottages surrounding the little town. Further out, wisps of fog rose from a broad river that flowed into a huge body of water. Connell had never seen the ocean before, but the water that wide could be nothing else. Connell breathed in so deeply he almost choked. The air was crisp and pure. So this was Trail's End, home of his supposed enemies. Used to the dark world of Steigenmore Castle, Connell felt like a stranger amid such brightness. What was a wolf like him doing in a place like this? He shook himself briskly, brushing aside his doubt. He was on a mission. He had to find the leader of the magical horses, Bella. Boldly, Connell leaped straight down the side of the hill and trotted straight into the heart of the town. "A wolf!" someone cried. A flurry of gasps and whispers rippled through the streets. Horses scattered and people shuttered their windows. Other hurried children indoors. A brave group of humans and horses remained to face down their enemy. "Why have you come here?" a man shouted to Connell. "Look," another gasped, pointing. "The wolf wears a starstone." Murmurs erupted from the group. The stone pulsed around Connell's neck. Using its power, he sent his thought out. "I seek the great horse Bella." "Bella, the wolf wants to see Bella." More murmurs. Connell could read the human's fear and confusion clearly. "We can't take him to Bella," said an old woman. "We don't know if he can be trusted. Even if he does have a starstone, he could have taken it by force." The group began to argue among themselves in low tones. Connell grew frustrated. He had come too far to be stopped by a group of foolish humans and horses. What did they know? Then abruptly the group ceased its whispering. A hush fell. At the same time, Connell felt his mind relax. Sensing a presence behind him, he turned. There stood a majestic white horse. She was surrounded by soft white aura that shimmered like stardust. The horse looked at Connell. Her dark eyes glowed with warm, penetrating energy. "I am Bella. What is your name, wolf?" Connell gazed back, trying to conceal his awe. "I am Connell, son of Myfor, scion of Finir." Connell's pedigree gave him great standing among the wolf pack. He was descended from the boldest and most legendary of wolves. But now, as the great horse looked down at him, Connell felt only shame. "You are bred of wicked stock. You are the son of death and destruction. Why do you appear before me?" Connell thought about the otter and the magical creatures held captured at Steigenmore Castle. Then he thought about Julian and remembered her words. "You are not like the other wolves." Bella nodded at him. She saw Connell's mind and the reason for his journey. Connell suspected she would have known, even had she not had the Starstone. You may yet prove better than your ancestors. I will help you, but we must hurry. Quickly, follow me." The great white horse began to gallop away, and Connell fell into step behind her. Before he realized what was happening, Connell gazed down to see the ground disappearing below him. Together they had risen in the air and were running on the wind. Connell glanced nervously at Bella. Her gold-flecked gaze steadied him. "Don't be afraid. You're with me, and soon the others will come." "Others?" Connell asked. "Yes, we will need help if we are to save your friend Julian and the great Starstone Otter Queen, as well as the other magical creatures." Stars emerged from Bella's glowing white aura, flying off the sky in 4 directions. She and Connell went higher and higher, Bella leading the way into the heavens. Moments later, the sky crackled with a bright white light. Connell recoiled, almost losing his pace. There was a loud clap of thunder, and a massive black stallion appeared. 2 minutes, 30 seconds. Emerging from the clouds with swift strides, he quickly caught up to Bella. The stallion glanced at her, and then at Connell. A short snort escaped his nostrils. "What is this wolf doing here?" Never slowing, Bella eyed the stallion at her side. "He is our ally, Thunder. I will explain soon. There's little time now." Bella drove harder into the wind, the great black stallion racing alongside her at the speed of lightning. Connell struggled to keep up with the 2 powerful creatures, but he was determined and pushed himself onward. Soon, a third magnificent horse appeared, carrying along the wind by an enormous pair of shimmering wings. Her sleek coat was a soft brown, and she was draped in silken ribbons. Nike, I guess. Bella nodded to greet her. Then two more of the great horses appeared. Fiona, a fiery red filly, and Jewel, a mahogany bay mare whose eyes sparkled as brightly as gems that dotted her forehead and dark mane. Each of the horses had answered Bella's call without questions, but Connell could feel their sharp suspicion of him. Wolves and wolf riders were the sworn enemies of horses. The Starstone conveyed the horses' distrust and doubt to Connell. Nike, the winged horse, looked to Bella. "What are we doing with this wolf who nips at our heels?" Bella's answer projected back, clear and strong. "He is here with my blessing. You must trust me." Thunder glared at Connell. "If he is so much as snarls in my direction, I'll strike him down with the fury of the north wind." Connell felt shunned, much as he had at the run of the litter years ago. Bella looked sternly at the black horse. "Calm yourself, Thunder. Save your wrath for those who deserve it. The wolf is not our enemy, but we shall soon face many that are." Traveling the sky with Bella and the others, Connell eventually began to feel a deep sense of peace. Maybe Julian was right. Maybe he was different from the other wolves, as he had thought. Bella glanced back and gave him a knowing nod. But suddenly another feeling overtook Connell. Looking ahead, he saw a patch of dark gray clouds. A sense of doom swelled up within him as in a shadow path. The horses began to slow their pace. Connell caught up at Bella. He was filled with fear. "What is this place?" Bella gazed back, a glimmer of sadness in her remarkable eyes. "Why, Connell, don't you recognize Staggermore Castle?"
Russia was huge.
Russia is enormous.
Enormous means
Huge. Big.
blah.
Blah. Don't fall.
Yeast means
Yeast? That's what you make bread with. Did you get to play outside today? Good.
Mom.
Mom. As he stood outside the castle walls, Connell felt as if he were seeing Staggermore for the first time. A cold shiver ran through him as he gazed at the menacing black castle, its stone turrets rising high into the dark sky, boiling with the clouds, storm clouds. There was no light here, nothing pure or good. Had he really called this place home? Bella and the other horses prepared for the attack. The horses were brave and powerful creatures, but taking the castle would be extremely dangerous. The group was greatly outnumbered, and Connell knew better than any creature just how fierce a wolf pack could be. Myfor was merciless and demanded the same of the other wolves. Still, there was no time to lose. They had to act quickly to save Julian and the others. Bella's white mane glowed brightly against dark gray clouds. She looked at Connell, her eyes filled with determination. "When we enter the castle, I want you to find Julian and the Starstone Otter Queen. It's up to you to see that they are safe. Stop at nothing." Connell nodded bravely, although his heart began to beat more quickly. "Thunder, go now." Thunder, the great black horse, stomped and reared. Bolts of lightning exploded from his hooves, slamming into the castle gates. They cracked and split like twigs before an axe, falling into the pile of dust and kindling. Connell heard a deep, low howl resounding through the castle walls. He knew the sound deep in his bones. Myfor was mobilizing the wolves. In a moment, they would be flooding out into formation, fierce and ready to fight. The time had come. Thunder pounded ahead, leading the rest of the group through the fallen gates. Nike, the majestic winged horse, streaked up into the sky, hovering above the castle. She scanned a dark maze of corridor below for captive animals in need of rescue, occasionally dipping and diving for a closer look. Suddenly, Myfor emerged from the doorway into the courtyard, hulking and ferocious. His eyes glowed with evil excitement, and his fur stood on all ends. Behind him were seemingly endless rows of snarling, snapping wolves. They faced the horses. Myfor threw his head back and howled. Connell raced towards the castle, hugging the shadows so he wouldn't be noticed. He couldn't risk the wolves or Ivana seeing him with the Starstone. If they learned Connell was against them, he would never be able to save Julian. He would have to do his best to blend in. The chaos of the battle, he might just be able to get away with it. Connell felt guilty once again pretending to be something he was not, but he would do whatever it took to find Julian and the Starstone Order Queen. As Connell moved through the shadows, he saw Nike dive from the air, swooping down to the ground to distract a group of wolves. They leaped up, snapping at her hoofs. Fluttering in the air just out of the reach, she kicked and bucked. Jewel, the stately bay, seized a moment and raced into the castle to search out the magical creatures. Once released, they could join the horses in battle. The wolves attacking Nike were becoming frenzied. One of them scrambled onto its fellow's back and leaped up, snapping at Nike's flank. The chestnut mare neighed in pain, then she gave a powerful thrust of her wings and shot skyward. The wolves were left writhing in a heap below. Wolves continued filing out of the castle halls in endless legions. Myfor's deep barking growls directed their moves. Connell could see that. In no time, the horses would be surrounded. Where was Bella? Connell realized suddenly that he hadn't seen the great white mare since thunder broke down the gates. He paused. Dread suddenly turned his limbs to jelly. As thunder whirled and stomped at the wolves around him, Fiona the fiery red horse broke away, racing in circles around the courtyard, her mane becoming a blur and the vibrant coat beginning to glow. Her hoofs flashed, and a blazing trail fire erupted behind him. Wolves howled as the flames lapped near, trapping them outside the fire ring and blinding their vision with smoke and white-hot flame. Several retreated in fear, fleeing past Connell. Then the fiery ring smoldered down, and the smoke began to drift off and wisp through the sky. There in the center of it all stood Bella, calm and majestic. The beautiful white horse was not daunted by the slavering, growling wolves. She walked through the middle of the courtyard slowly, seeming to take no notice of them as they circled from all sides. When the wolves were just inches away from her, Bella reared up and tossed her stately head. Her bright neigh, the sound of 1,000 crystal bells, echoed off the walls of the courtyard. The wolves all around her stopped in their tracks, sensing the strange and unusual power that filled the air. Connell saw a flash of white pure light, so bright he had to close his eyes for fear of being blinded. When he turned back, the wolves around Bella had transformed from huge menacing creatures to small cubs tumbling on the ground. Connell couldn't help but be amused at the once black-hearted beasts now nipping playfully at one another's tails. Maybe there's hope for them after all, he thought, as he slipped into the castle. He made his way down pitch-black corridors until he came to a great wooden door near Ivana's chambers. Connell felt the starstone around his neck glowing, and he felt confident. Someone or something was inside, he was sure. He threw his weight against the solid door and slowly opened. There, trapped in a large iron cage, was the Starstone Order Queen. The otter's bright eyes locked on Connell's, the Starstone connecting their minds. You were true to your word, you returned. Connell was heartened by the otter's kind thought, but his heart plunged. Where's Julian? It had never occurred to him that she and the otter wouldn't be together. The otter gazed at him gently. You will find your friend. I am quite sure she is close by. Connell wasted no time. He set to work freeing the otter, chewing through the thick leather strap that secured the cage door. At last the cage swung open and the otter stepped out delicately. Take the stone, Connell said, bowing his head toward the otter so that she could lift it to his neck. I no longer need it. Go to the courtyard where your friend Bella awaits your help. There are others to be saved. With that, the great wolf turned and sped off through the corridor. Julian was somewhere within these dark stone walls. He would find her. Don't make me ask again, Ivana hissed. Who helped you summon her here? Julian knew at once Ivana was speaking of Bella. Connell must have been successful on his journey. Now he and Bella had returned to the castle. Julian sat, captain of Ivana's private chamber, staring back in silence. She would never tell that Connell had helped her. You really are a foolish child, with your little dreams and doodles. Ivana's tone softened slightly, and an evil smile danced across her lips. I had such high hopes for you all these years ago. Julian's mind raced. Play dumb. Don't give anything away. Let her think she has the upper hand. Yes, my darling, Ivana continued. I know all about your little drawings, all those memories, all those creatures. I've been looking at your journal for years. How else would I know which one of your little friends to expect at the castle? How best to capture them and use them to serve me? Oh, don't worry, your precious book is perfectly safe. In fact, here it is. Ivana pulled out the small midnight blue leather journal from her cloak and threw it on the ground in front of Julian. The book landed with a thud, tumbling open to the page with the dog of the otter. Julian's heart tightened in her chest. I'm curious, Ivana purred. As the wolf rider gazed at her, Julian felt uncomfortable, like a mouse in the gaze of a hungry cat. Did you really believe your precious journal came from that ragtag gypsy family of yours? As if they could give you something so magical and marvelous, they could barely put clothes on your back. A lump grew in Julian's throat. She felt her eyes well up with tears. Her family. All these years she had yearned for some connection, some memory, some dream of them. Stop, Julian cried. Don't you dare speak of them. What are you pecking at, John Paul? Huh?
This one.
Something on your back? Want me to look when I'm done reading?
Yes.
Okay. Stop, Julian cried. Don't dare speak of them. Stop pining for your past. Still pining for your past, are you? Ivana said. You should be grateful that I rescued you from the bunch of worthless fools. I had heard of your ability to communicate with animals, people that even as a hobby, as a baby, wherever you went, magical creatures would follow. But your family didn't know what to do with you. They never would have appreciated your special talents the way I have. You see, I had the magical journal and quill, but they wouldn't work for me. No, the magic pen required somebody with goodness in her heart, someone like you. I did you the favor by taking you from those worthless gypsies. Julian gasped. The painful truth washed over her. Her family had not abandoned her, as Ivana had said. Instead, Ivana had stolen her away from them and used her to call magical creatures to the castle. Images of the happy life she could have had flashed through her mind. Julian's heart was breaking for all that she had lost, but as strong as that feeling was the fierce new resolve that burned inside her, she glared at Ivana, defiant. Ivana had stolen her from her family, but she would steal no more. Just then a howl told through the walls of the castle, shaking its very stones. Ivana jerked her head around, her eyes narrowed. That's my force, she whispered. The battle has begun. Whipping her head back, the wolf rider stared at Julian. Her eyes blazed with fury. She pointed a bony finger toward the blank page in the notebook. If you didn't use your notebook to summon that creature, then someone else must have brought her here. I will find out who, and you will both pay. Ivana grabbed Julian roughly by the arm. Now come with me. Julian reached down to snatch the notebook as she rose. But when her fingers made contact with the soft worn leather, she felt Ivana's nails dig into the flesh of her arm. I'll be taking that, Ivana said. Reluctantly, Julian surrendered the journal. Ivana thrust the book back into the folds of the cloak, yanking Julian towards the door and out of the chamber with her other hand. Let go of me, Julian protested, trying to pull free from Ivana's grasp. There's no use fighting, you stupid child, Ivana said. I'm going to put you somewhere you won't be found. Then I'm going to defend my castle against unwelcome guests. Julian glared at Ivana. Ivana gave her a cruel smile. Oh, don't worry, child. You won't miss out on the action. You'll have a perfect view of my form me destroying your new friend Bella. Julian stood helplessly gazing out the turret of the windows of the courtyard below. It was a complete chaos. Wolves and wolf cubs ran this way and that, snarling and growling. Two magnificent horses, a large black stallion and a blazing red mare, lunged at the wolves from two sides, corralling them in one section of the courtyard.
Mmm. Mmm.
Oh, the horses, Julian whispered. They're so beautiful. Another horse appeared, a rich reddish brown with a dark mane and glowing gems studded in its muzzle. It was just as beautiful as the other two. Aboard the red-brown horse were magical creatures of all kinds: bubble turtles, pipsqueak longtails, tassel mice. Julian could scarcely believe her eyes. Her magical friends were being rescued. Julian searched the crowd for Connell. Fuzzyfoot, where are you? She murmured. Just then, a huge black wolf. Okay, continue. Just then, a huge black wolf appeared below. He stalked to the center of the courtyard, teeth bared, snarling. My four. He let out a deep, angry growl and challenge. My four's opponent came into view, a majestic white horse surrounded by a cloud of softly glowing light. Julian gasped. Bella! Here was the mysterious horse from her visions, right before her very eyes. My four howled and attacked. Julian's heart pounded. She could barely watch. Bella evaded My Four's malicious lunges, showing no fear. Again and again, My Four was repelled, as if the white light around the great mare could not be penetrated. Then Ivana swept into the courtyard behind My Four, her cape billowing a black trail in her wake. The weak daylight seemed to dim even further as she raised her metal staff. Even from high above, Julian could sense the rage coming from her mistress. Suddenly, a beam of brilliant light shot forth from the gloom. It hit Ivana, and she stumbled, blinded by the light. Then across the courtyard stood Starstone, Otter Queen, sending a white-hot beam at Ivana from the blue stone around its neck. Julian's heart leaped. The beautiful creature she had befriended was free from her stone prison. The black stallion stomped at the ground and sent a shock lightning towards the disoriented Ivana. The lightning bolt hit Ivana's staff, sending bolts of electricity through Ivana's body. Ivana dropped her staff and collapsed onto the ground in a daze. The red mare, joined quickly by the black stallion, kept the other wolves at bay, while the brown horse shuttled the last of the magical creatures to safety beyond the courtyard walls. The Starstone Otter Queen scurried to Bella and leaped onto her back. Bella galloped swiftly across the courtyard, poised on Bella's back. The Otter Queen looked even more regal than the first day Julian had seen her. The horses began to retreat beyond the courtyard wall just as Ivana picked herself up from the ground. Fiercely clutching her staff, she aimed it at the horses and sent flashes of piercing hot light in their direction, but Bella spread her white light into a protective shield around her friends. Under Bella's protective aura, Bella and the Starstone Otter Queen led the way into the open grass of the castle grounds. Julian had long imagined a day when her magical friends would be captives no more. Now it was here. If only she were among them. With the magical creatures now safe from Ivana and her wolves, the great black stallion reared up, turned his attention to My Four. Thunder's massive hooves struck the stones beneath him, sending sparks exploding all around him. My Four snarled viciously in response. He was poised, ready to leap. Just as My Four lunged, the black stallion struck the ground again. A bolt of lightning shot out, directly at the huge wolf's face. Yelping, My Four stumbled and pawed at his eyes. The stallion shot another bolt towards the approaching Ivana, sending her body soaring into the castle wall. Then the stallion cantered away. Ivana rose slowly and unsteadily to her feet. She threw her fist into the air furious. Julian ran across the room to the opposite window of the turret, overlooking the grounds and the black forest below. The black stallion had joined the other horses outside the castle. They stood for a moment majestic amid a swarm of magical creatures. As they turned to gallop off, Bella cast a glance in the direction of the turret. Julian felt a warm glow as her eyes connected. Don't worry, she said softly. I'll be all right. Julian wanted to believe her own words, but as she watched the horses grow smaller and smaller in the distance, she couldn't help but feel completely alone. Julian heard the wooden door rattle. A key jangled in the lock. Someone was entering the room in a turret. Julian's body stiffened as the door flew open. There stood Ivana and Connell. Connell's eyes met Julian's. Then he quickly looked away. She tried to read his expression, but could not. Well, Ivana said, where is your great Bella now? Ran off and left you, didn't she? And took all of your magical little friends, too. Not to worry, though. They'll be back soon. In fact, you're going to get them back. I'll never help you, Julian cried. You have no choice, Ivana snapped. Connell here will see to that. You may be able to charge some silly little creatures of the forest, but you hold no power over my wolf pack. With that, Ivana turned to Connell. It's time to prove yourself, son of My Four. The magical creatures will not return to the castle now, even if this wretched girl summons them. They are too afraid of the castle, so you are to lead her to the forest and guard her there until she has drawn every magical creature back to her. I am days away from perfecting a formula that will transfer the creatures' magics to me. Once I have that magic, I will rid this world of those horses once and for all. I am too close for victory for all my plans to be foiled now, Ivana ranted. Connell nodded silently, his expression still unreadable. If that stupid girl refuses to cooperate, you know what to do, Ivana continued. You have until the morning to return with all the magical creatures. If you are not back by sunrise, I will release the pack. They are riled up and hungry for revenge. They will take it out on you as well as the girl if you fail me. Ivana plunged a bony hand under her cloak. You'll be needing this, she told Julian with a sneer. In her hand, she held the small midnight blue book. Julian's hands trembled as she reached for her journal. The small book that had brought her so much solace now seemed like a dangerous weapon. She didn't want to take it, didn't want to use its power to lure her friends back. She could only hope. Mom. Connell was truly on her side. If he was, maybe they could find a way to get out of this together. Take it, Ivana shrieked. Julian had no choice. Her hand closed around the soft, familiar leather. Now get out of my sight, Ivana said, and stormed out of the room. Julian shivered as she and Connell hiked deeper into the forest. The air grew colder and colder. The ground they now traveled was covered in snow. Jagged mountains loomed ahead, silhouetted in the moonlight. Julian had dared not speak until they were beyond the castle grounds. At last she broke her silence. I'm sorry, Fuzzyfoot, she said. Sorry I dragged you into this mess. I just wanted to help the others. Please understand. Connell let out a soft grumble. Julian knew her friend well enough to understand what his quiet response meant. He was not angry with her. She felt a rush of relief. As they reached the clearing, Connell stopped. He looked at Julian and down at the journal clutched in her cold hands. No, Julian whispered, thinking of all her animal friends. Surely you don't want me to lure them back here, back to Ivana. But Connell's gaze didn't waver. Julian thought about everything Connell had done for her and the magical creatures. She had asked a lot of him when she sent him to find Bella. Surely he had proven himself, even though he seemed to be telling her to do something terribly wrong. Maybe it was time for her to trust him now. Carefully, Julian opened a notebook and began flipping through the pages, drawing after drawing, creature after creature. Her mind fixated on the images, and the memories rushed over her in a warm flood. She saw all of her magical friends, Tom-Toms, Twinkleimps, Bobolinks, Fire Spoops, and Pipsqueak Longtails, Wiffle Bears, Bubble Turtles, Tassel Mice, Rose Dragons, and Tea Leaf Pandas. Julian reached the last drawing, the Starstone Otter. She thought of how gentle and wise the creature had been. Suddenly a light appeared in the distance, glowing through the still night. Whatever it was coming closer. Julian's heart beat more quickly. The light now blinked through the trees, only yards away. Had Ivana already released a pack? A Twinkleimp fluttered in the clearing. She was followed by a Violet Pixie and a Wiffle Bear. Then, trudging through the snow, appeared Tea Leaf Pandas, Bubble Turtles, and Rose Dragons. On her shoulder perched Tassel Mice and Pipsqueak Longtails. All of the magical creatures returned, flocking to Julian. She was happy to see their familiar faces, but also terrified. This was just what Ivana wanted. Before she could do anything, branches rustled. There in the moonlight stood Bella, poised gracefully on her back, the otter, the starstone glowing softly around its neck. Bella looked at Julian and then at Connell. Connell moved closer to Julian. Slowly, gently, he nudged her with his muzzle towards Bella and the others. Julian stared at her friend, sad and confused. Fuzzyfoot, she whispered. He let out a tiny growl in response. Go with them. But what will happen to you? Julian asked. Connell did not answer. He just gave his friend one last glance and bounded off through the woods in the direction of Steigenmore Castle. Julian returned to Bella. The great white horse's eyes glowed, full of kindness and knowledge. Just as you had faced your destiny, so he must face his. Connell entered the castle courtyard at a swift trot. Inside, Wolf stood anxiously at attention as Ivana stormed through the midst. Connell, Ivana said, noticing he returned without the other animals or the girls. Explain yourself, you worthless hound. Connell strode back over to Ivana. His golden eyes were ablaze with anger. Not a trace of fear remained in his being. Facing his mistress, he let out a growl. The sound flowed from deep within him. His message was clear. He had betrayed Ivana, had helped Bella and the others escape, and he was not sorry. He would no longer serve this cruel mistress and her hateful tyranny. At once, Connell felt free. Ivana stood in stony silence, slowly a flash of red in the pale cheeks. Her eyes narrowed. Finally she spoke, her words like daggers. I hope you enjoy your final moments. She stepped closer to Connell. Her heavy metal staff echoed dully on the stone floor, and with each step, when they were just inches apart, she raised her arm with the staff high in the air, ready to strike. To my four and the remaining pack, she called. He was always the runt, small and weak. He is still weak, isn't he? Isn't he weak? The pack howled and agreed, quick to turn on one of their own. My four turned his back to his son in disgust. Connell braced himself for the impact of what Ivana was about to do. He was ready to face whatever violent magic flew from her staff. Ivana's face twisted in a wicked smile. Since you think so much of those dear little horsies, and since you obviously want to be free, I'll grant you your wish. Ivana threw back her cloak and pointed her staff directly at Connell. A flash erupted from the metal tip, searing into Connell's fur. He yelped in pain, then everything went black. A moment later, a dim light filled his eyes. The sound of snickering pack filled his ears. As he blinked, the courtyard opened up once again before him in a hazy detail. Connell knew he must get far away from Steigamore. He tried to raise to his feet, but he fell. Something was wrong.
Blah.
Blah.
Sounds like musical instrument.
Horn.
Sounds like musical instrument on iPad.
Horn.
This one.
Yeah, it's a horn. Or a trumpet.
This one.
Piano.
Hands or feet.
Feet.
Or
Kimmy.
wearing costume is TY.
It is T-Y.
To do on your Gabba Gabba favorite part is Cammy TY.
It is.
Alika saying hi.
Hi. Skeleton. Skeleton. He tried to rise again, but slipped sloppily against the stone. He could feel no sensation in his toe pads. His legs, what was happening? Connell blinked again and looked down. Then he saw his paws had been replaced by hooves, horses' hooves. For a third time he tried to rise, this time managing to stand unsteadily. As the sensation returned to Connell's legs, he realized his body also felt strange. His once cool black coat was patched with gray and white. A simple saddle was strapped on his back. Looking up, Connell saw his reflection in one of the castle windows. His eyes widened as he took in spindly, skinny legs, his stubbly mane, his familiar tapering muzzle, and white fangs. He was no longer a wolf, but he was not a horse either. With horror, he realized Ivana had turned him into an unnatural blend of two creatures. He was part horse, part wolf, and all freak. Connell gazed at himself in blank confusion, and Ivana began to cackle. You didn't know which side to choose, did you, she said, wolves or horses? Now you'll forever be caught in the middle, part of neither the pack nor the herd. Myfor's lips curled, and he growled menacingly at Connell. This freakish beast is no son of mine, he snarled. Indeed not, Ivana agreed. I'd say it's fine time for Connell to be leaving. She slammed her staff on the stone floor and glared at Connell. Get far from here, you disgraceful mutt, she hissed. Let's see how we fare in the world. I'll give you a head start, but I'm releasing my four in the pack when the moon dips below the mountaintops. I wouldn't want them to catch up with me if I were you. Connell found himself frozen with woods surrounding Steigamore once more. This time he was alone. He wished for Julian's company, the face of his friend. His mind was still in shock, his body stiff and strange, his new legs faltering with each step. Stumbling through the snowy night, he gazed at the mountaintop looming in the distance. The moon had begun its descent into the sky. It hovered now just near the mountain peak. A fierce wind blew, shaking snow from the trees and piercing through Connell's new thin coat. He shivered and forced himself onward. Then came a low, menacing howl in the distance. Myfor. The wolf pack was ready to hunt. Connell tried to run, but his hooves slipped in the snow. It's no use, he thought. How can I run with these ridiculous clawless feet? The pack would soon be upon him. Gazing again at the looming mountain, Connell made a choice. Instead of trying to outrun the pack on flat ground through the woods, he would climb up the mountain. It was a dangerous plan. If Myfor and the others found him, he would be trapped on the mountainside with nowhere to escape. But there was no other option. Connell was certain he could not outrun the pack through the woods. With a heavy heart and faltering legs, he began to climb. Exhausted, Connell reached a ledge way up to the mountain. He was climbing the stretch of a sheer cliff. The only way up was steep, narrow path that wound back and forth along the cliff's face. His legs burned, and he had to stop to catch his breath. He knew he could climb no higher. Suddenly he heard movement in one of the clearings. Something was rustling through the trees. Connell held his breath as he peered through the ledge. My4 burst through the trees, his eyes glowing in the dim light. He sniffed and snarled at the ground, barking at the wolves behind him. It looked like the pack would continue on through the woods, but then My4 stopped. "Be still," he snapped at the wolves. "The wind has shifted." My4 threw back his great black head and sniffed the air hungrily, and then turned slowly in Connell's direction. Charging at the lead, My4 led the other wolves up the steep climb. Connell could hear the yelps and the howls growling, growing closer and closer until they were at last in front of him. My4 stepped forward. Connell stepped back. He knew he was trapped. There was only the ledge and the ground far below. Looking at the great beast before him, Connell could scarcely believe this evil creature was his flesh and blood. He would rather be half horse than the mirror image of this vicious wolf. A defiant bravery welled up in Connell. My4 snarled and took another step forward, but this time Connell did not retreat. Instead, he stepped forward. From deep within his gut, he released an ear-splitting howl. Somewhere between a wolf's cry and a horse's neigh, the ground trembled and the other wolf scattered in retreat. A snowdrift on the ridge above began to quake. In his mind, Connell heard a gentle voice speaking to him. "Close your eyes and leap, Connell." For once, Connell did not question as he flung himself off the ledge and into the air. He felt invincible. Just as Connell jumped, the snowdrift above thundered down in an avalanche towards the wolf pack. There was an eruption of howls from the pack, which cut off abruptly. Then the night fell silent once more, except for the wind. Connell had been expecting to feel the weightlessness of falling, but instead he was being lifted up on waves of air. He started moving his legs and realized that he was actually running on air as he went higher and higher into the sky. The wolf pack and Steigenmore were already tiny flecks in the distance below. Bella, he thought, she must be lending me her flying abilities to help me escape. Connell looked for the North Star and continued traveling on the air path in the direction of what he knew his heart was the trail's end. He'd been there only once, but for some strange reason, his heart was pulling him toward it. He wasn't sure how long the trip would take him, but he knew he would make it there. Julian and Connell raced across an emerald green field to the edge of a small stream. "You whiz, Fuzzyfoot," Julian cried. Connell nudged her playfully. His new body, like his new home, was starting to feel familiar, although he couldn't call it comfortable. They stopped to catch their breath. Connell waded into the stream to cool his tired limbs. "Oh, Fuzzyfoot," Julian said, looking around. "Who would have ever imagined us here?" Trail's End seemed like a dream to them both. Still, Connell couldn't help but feel like an outsider. Neither wolf nor horse, he was an outcast of Steigenmore Castle and a stranger to Trail's End. This was Ivana's plan, of course, for Connell to spend his days alone, not truly fitting in anywhere. The thought filled his mind like a storm cloud. Just then, Bella appeared, cantering across the field toward Connell and Julian. Connell felt his sadness melt away. He remembered that night, alone on the mountain ledge facing My4 in the pack. It was Bella who had told him to leap. She had spoken to him and given him the courage he needed to trust his instincts. He'd gotten there trusting without the shadow path, simply by trusting Bella and listening to her voice. And in all his days here, Bella had never once made Connell feel unwelcome. She treated him with the same kindness as she did other members of her own herd. She believed in him. Bella greeted Julian and Connell with a flick of her majestic head. The lingering doubts drifted from Connell's mind like the clouds in the wind. Trail's End was his home. A world away through the winding reaches of the shadow path, deep within a castle colder and darker than Steigenmore, Ivana and My4 faced their own fates. The wolf and his rider bowed humbly before the wrath of one who was more evil and more powerful than themselves. "Stupid wolfins," an angry voice hissed. "Did you really expect to defeat Bella and her allies so easily?" "Mistress," Ivana pleaded, "you must understand." "Silence," the voice bellowed. "It is you who must understand. You have failed me. You have failed all wolf riders. The next time, and there will be a next time, you will not be so careless. If you are, mark my words, there will be grave consequences." The great horse whinnied at Julian. Julian realized she meant to climb aboard and ride with Bella. Gently, she hoisted herself up and twined her fingers in Bella's soft white mane. Bella began to trot, her graceful gait eating up the distance between the ground. Then the two slowly rose into the air, galloping across the sky. The wind blew through Julian's hair and sunlight warmed her face. She closed her eyes and she thoughts floated more freely than they ever had. Her mind wandered back. There was a sun-drenched field, wildflowers were sprinkled throughout, a vast landscape of knee-high grass. In a clearing sat a colorful caravan, painted red and embellished with yellow and turquoise swills. A line of clothing had been hung to dry in the warm air, shirts and dress, clothes for a baby. On the ground, flattening out patch of grass beneath it, lay a colorful patchwork blanket. In the middle of the blanket, a baby with soft red hair cooed and gurgled. Julian immediately sensed a connection with the baby. As she studied more closely, she gasped. It was herself, years ago. As the thought sank in, she began to see the rest of the vision from the baby's eyes. Lying there in a blanket, looking up at the sky, a woman whose arms were loaded with fresh laundry came over. She gazed down at the baby, Julian. The woman had red hair too and green eyes that sparkled like gems. Her smile was bright as the sunshine that formed a warm halo around her head. This was Julian's mother, kind, caring, and loving. A man's deep voice echoed in the background, full of laughter. Julian's father. The woman moved out of the picture, and the baby Julian once again lay contentedly staring up at the sky. Puffy clouds floated above, and tree branches blew in the breeze. Her baby eyes fluttered closed, opening a few moments later as another creature filled the space above her. It was a horse, as white and pure as the clouds above. The horse's dark eyes gazed deep into the baby's, as it was offering a gift, Bella. Julian had known her years ago as a baby. Bella had come to her, summoned by the special force inside Julian and called the animals. Their paths had been destined to cross again. The memory had leaped deep within Julian without her even knowing. It had fueled her vision at the castle. Julian slowly opened her eyes. There she was, once again in the trail's end, racing through the sky on Bella's back. Only now, a sense of wholeness like she had never known filled her entire being. The aching gaps in her memory were gone. At peace with her past and her own special powers, Julian could look towards the future. She gently squeezed Bella's neck. "Thank you," Julian whispered. "Thank you for giving me the greatest gift." The end.